right, it's Friday and we're back with another episode of Punk Rock Politics. I am Mitch Maley, joined by Brendan Reagan, and this is the last episode before we take a summer hiatus, but it is going to be a good one. Lots to talk about, starting with Fauci back in the news for the email leaks.
What do you mean back in the news? He never left the news cycle since March of 2019.
So
or 2020. What year is it?
2021.
Yeah, thank you. 2020.
Year of our Lord. So we've got some emails that came up in a massive Freedom of Information Act request, I believe, by the Washington Post. And there were several of them with Fauci talking about, in fact, a January 2020 email to him from the director of the country's largest biomedical research facility suggested the unusual features of the virus may indicate it is engineered, prompting Dr. Fauci to say he will reach out via phone. We're not typing. There will be no record of this. The email will not be televised. In April 2020, an email from the director of the National Institute of Health, Francis Collins, nudged Dr. Fauci with the subject line, "Conspiracy gains momentum." The doctor's response to this was fully redacted. This May, Dr. Fauci said he is not convinced the virus originated and naturally expressed support for an investigation, but that was after 14 months of really squashing that. I mean, if you look back to the Rand Paul, if you can get by looking at his bad hairpiece long enough from a year ago when he grilled them in front of Congress, Fauci was pretty stalwart on that not being the case and on gain of function research not having been done and not having been supported. We've now...
Tom Cotton, too, for a guy that I absolutely loathe head to toe. He was kind of the singular voice early on, yes, saying like, are we sure it didn't happen in a lab? And nobody listened to him. And in fact, quite a bit of hard left media roasted him for it. Yeah. And here he is saying, all I was doing was asking the question. It's looking pretty good to be asking right now.
So you have this scenario, and also there was some communications between Facebook and Dr. Fauci, and where on one hand you want the platforms that disseminate information on the grandest scale in our world right now to be talking to public health officials and taking steps, because yes, there was a tremendous amount of batshit crazy conspiracy theory stuff floating out. I mean, remember the Plandemic documentary and all that. You do need to have, I believe, especially in time of crisis, you do need to have sort of fences up of some sort, but it begs the question then, who's putting them up? And when you have the politicization of science the way that it has been in recent years, and then you have the politicization of the disease the way that it was, that's concerning.
Yeah, it's an impossible situation, I think, to have someone in that position who's not going to come under serious fire because of the rapidly changing developments in terms of not only the news cycle and the hysteria and the responses, but also what we know about the virus, the science, the sequencing. All of that was changing so fast that you could make anyone look truly like a liar based on plucking out past statements based on other information. But Fauci was very adamant that gain-of-function research was not being supported by our funds. We're kind of a little bit back to the kind of Planned Parenthood thing where it's like no public support goes to Planned Parenthood for abortions, but Planned Parenthood does get public support for its other services. All the money mixes together in a bank account, and who's to say what's actually functioning towards what? There's a big argument about like, well, are we technically funding abortions? I think he was making a point like that. He said,
but it seems like that point was not well made. It seems
no. And I think he's making the point now that, oh, well, who's to say if they used some money for one thing, like we don't know over there because we don't know how the government works. It's like, it's a little late to be saying that.
Right. And we do know that in 2017, he acted to unpause under the Trump administration a pause that went in on gain-of-function research funding from the United States. So he has been arguably, as you peel this back, you see he's arguably been the chief high platform supporter of gain-of-function research in the United States. So a very we talked about this before. Just a quick, reiteration. Gain of function is when you take these viruses in a lab and you artificially induce the kind of
it's like mutations. Right?
I'm sorry, the mutations that you would happen naturally and occur in the wild, and you sort of induce them, using tissue in the laboratory setting, exposing them to things until they eventually build the ability to do the things that you want. In this case, taking zoonotic diseases that could gain the ability to jump to humans and could gain the ability to be transmitted between human to human, and saying, well, let's make them do that now and then figure out a way to fight them.
Yeah.
That's very controversial. And it turns out there's a very split scientific, opinion on whether the risk is worth the reward there.
Yeah.
And if this was caused by it, I think that would be the nails in the coffin of that argument, right?
It has to be. I mean, you can't cause a global pandemic and kill millions of people and not point to that and say, well, this is precisely why you wouldn't do something like that. However, some of this research is leading us to understand variants a whole lot better. I was reading about how certain scientists were continuing to do this is long after the coronavirus is all over the world already. In terms of doing the same type of research, that gain of function research, and then ending up with the exact type of different variants that we had throughout the world, and seeing what's causing that. And so then they know, all right, we know why or what's likely to come if the coronavirus is exposed to X, Y, and Z. And a lot of that work, of course, is exposed to vaccines. Because if you expose it only to a minor amount of vaccine, it tends to figure out a way to beat that vaccine, turns into a deadlier variant. So you do want to do some of that research.
Right, and then the question becomes, you do it once it has become a human problem? Because you can look at it and say, hey,
God, yeah. I mean,
we're getting great vaccine results and we're getting great treatment results based on the information we got from the thing that caused the virus to be in the pandemic in the first place.
Sorry we burned the house down, but we've realized...
in burning the house down.
In burning the house down, we've revealed the cause of fires.
Right. All right, so let's see. Next we've got from sludge.com, former Obama Secretary of Labor. This is a priceless peach here. And more recently, DNC Chair Tom Perez, now working for an anti-labor lobbying firm. DC lobbying firm Venable LLP, which specializes in services defending employers against labor unions, including collective bargaining negotiations, refuting unfair labor practice allegations, and offering advice during union organizing campaign and petition drives, is paying big money to our former labor secretary. Robert Reich isn't out doing this. Interesting to note. And that's why you'll never actually see a person like Robert Reich again in that position. In addition to his anti-union work, Venable represents dozens of corporations, trade associations, and municipal organizations in their lobbying before the federal government. Department of Defense contracting giant Lockheed Martin employs them, along with a whole host of other shady businesses. So Tom Perez, sellout of the week. I mean, he went for the gold. He went big.
I know the answer to this question already, but have you no shame?
He's already a rich man.
He must be.
He's already got a 7-figure net worth. So you look at it and you say, you don't need any more money. But as the former DNC chair and labor secretary, you can make a fine living and sleep on.
Yeah, you could be a lobbyist for 100
You
different
don't even
things.
have to be a lobbyist. You could just go on the speaker's lecture.
That's
tour.
true.
That's it. You could just go and talk for a couple $100,000 a pop.
Not Tom Perez, though. He's not fun to listen to.
Tens of thousands, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Secretary of Labor at a university setting.
And the former
tens
DNC
of thousands,
chair.
easily. I'm sure you can get a 6-figure ceremonial position at some university as well.
Yeah.
Right? Visiting whatever at Harvard. You can live high on the hog and sleep on a bed of fine linens every night without going and selling out to the actual villainous bad guys of your field. I used to represent the worker and how I crushed them with my hands.
We made such a huge deal out of the fact that Trump appointed nothing but secretaries of departments who actively wanted to destroy those departments. The people who are running the EPA who were
yes.
coal lobbyists and the people who wanted to eliminate the Department of Energy. And this is like even worse, I think, in my opinion, because it's not like you're being appointed to some governmental position to like make the country better under a different set of policy ideas. You're just selling out to a company that will pay you a lot to completely change your point of view, to do an about face on everything that you worked for.
And more importantly, to go and use all those connections you made and let them
exploit
know
them,
how well you're doing and show them your wonderful new life and say, hey, this is what awaits you if you help me out here.
This is the pot of gold at the end of
This is
the sell your soul rainbow.
to the lack of salvation. Yeah, so we've got that. Nikki Fried, Florida Ag Commissioner,
future governor of Florida,
jumps into the gubernatorial race, making it interesting. I think she's got to be the instant favorite over Charlie Crist. What do you think?
Immediately.
Okay.
Immediately. She's the last Democrat to win a statewide election, and I think that alone is the most exciting part of her candidacy.
She is literally the only notable Democrat in Florida.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Like from a statewide perspective, that's it.
That's so fucking sad.
After Senator Nelson retired, that's it.
That's really sad. Although it looks like Rubio is going to get a good, strong challenge from who is it, Val Demings, as well.
Yes.
So she, that's
I would so much rather see Val Demings run for governor.
Me too.
Where I think she'd have a better chance. I don't see
too.
her beating Rubio,
especially with the way that Cuban Republicans are so. They're turning out so strongly right now, and especially how unbelievably important they were in 2016 and 2020. I don't see that trending away from a Cuban American like Marco Rubio. I feel like he's going to beat her by 8 or 10 points, probably. Like I mean, I'd love to see her win. Don't get me wrong, but besides her, I couldn't name a statewide Democrat who matters at all.
Rubio must be feeling a little heat at least, because I am getting 6 to 12 meaningless press release emails from his camp a day.
Wow.
His volume was more like 1 a day, every other day. With these press releases, they're about 6 a day now, sometimes 12.
His
He has a statement on everything.
Oh, I'm sure he does. His star has really fallen nationally.
Yeah.
He means nothing nationally
He never,
anymore.
ever recovered from Trump.
Yeah, tell him he was small.
Yeah, just spanking him around and then trying that little hands joke and stuff like that. And it just, everybody's looking at him like, what are you doing?
Oh, little
What are you
Marco.
doing here? Yeah.
Little Marco. But the question remains, will Trump primary him? No, and I don't mean Trump himself. Will Ivanka primary Marco or somebody?
No, she's come out and said she definitely won't. She doesn't have any kind of organization in
will
place.
Will they put someone up, or because I know
That would be
they,
interesting.
they would love to run to the right of Marco.
That would be interesting, yeah.
But if there's something crazy like that doesn't happen, I feel like even though he means nothing nationally anymore, he will coast in Florida.
Yeah. But listen, to your point, wouldn't it be interesting? I think Trump could endorse just about anyone against him in the primary, and he'd have some problems.
Immediate problems. Yeah.
Like even a real, he could endorse like the My Pillow guy in the primary, and we could have a competitive
Mike Lindell.
Yeah, I think Mike Lindell against Marco Rubio with an emphatic endorsement from not only Trump but the whole family.
Yeah,
and I think Rubio's got problems.
Big problems. Yeah, I think immediately Rubio has fallen into that like, we will vote for you because you've got the R next to your name, but nothing about you is MAGA at all. Like nothing about you excites that base, and they would be thrilled to eject him as like a member of the Washington deep state.
In other news related, once disgraced traitor and now rehabilitated patriot Michael Flynn back in the news. The U.S. Army said Wednesday that it will not investigate former General Michael Flynn for statements he recently made in which he appeared to endorse a Myanmar-style coup occurring in the U.S. We are aware of the statements Lieutenant General Flynn made May 30th and June 1st. The Army is not investigating these statements any further at this time, an Army spokesman said in a statement as reported by CNN. Given the fact that Flynn is retired, the Army's decision is in line with the U.S. military's typical approach to similar situations when potential misconduct carried out by retired members who are out of uniform does not prompt an investigation. Flynn is facing bipartisan criticism after appearing to endorse such a coup in the U.S. at an event in Dallas on Sunday. The question asked by the audience was, I want to know what happened He said, Myanmar, and I want to know why it can't happen here. And Flynn said, no reason. I mean, it should happen here. No reason. That's right. So Flynn endorsing a coup.
He thinks we should overthrow the government and install a dictator.
As do about 30% of Republicans right now.
Yeah, and normally you go to jail for something like that.
Yeah.
Can we, if the military's not going to do anything about this, can we send it to the Department of Justice? I mean, like, this is like a legit, this guy was in Trump's cabinet briefly, but he was,
And this is a guy that's all the way out there on the fringe that was endorsing QAnon theories before they were
big
born.
time. Oh yeah, and he has completely sold himself out to the wackadoo tour. He will show up at any event, anytime, anywhere. I'm so ready for Sacha Baron Cohen to get this guy because he's going to eventually.
He was just in Bradenton at the now defunct DeSoto Mall 2 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah,
Speaking.
yeah. Who was he with? I think he was there with maybe one of the Trump kids or something. He was there with some other empty suit.
One of those.
It wasn't a full suit between them. I'll put it that way.
Probably the My Pillow guy.
May have been gearing up for that primary challenge. What about Michael Flynn in the primary against Rubio?
Dude, Mike Flynn would be dangerous.
Take him right down. He would take him right down.
Or Lynn Wood running. That would be fun, seeing that guy.
Oh, yeah. Or the woman.
Sidney Powell. the Kraken. Sidney the Kraken Powell running against little Marco Rubio.
Yeah, any of those. Bring them out.
No, Mike Flynn needs to shut up and go away or he will go to jail again. I think that's pretty clear at this point.
According to The Uprising, new photo evidence has surfaced that former President Donald Trump met with a Florida-based CEO who helped organize the Patriot caravans to Washington, D.C. on the day of the Capitol riot. Over 3 months after the riot took place, had him down at Mar-a-Lago. They had a private meeting. So some other...
A debrief, if you will.
He's also... It's been reported that Trump is obsessed with auditing the election. So the latest QAnon conspiracy theory is that sometime in August, through some Byzantine process, Trump will be reinstated as president in August. I forget. I did not spend the time to find out what means in August. I only have so much bandwidth, and I just
if you read it, I promise you would not have understood
I wouldn't have understood. So so Flynn is kind of leaning into this. Trump seems to think that these audits can present the opportunity to do this. One advisor told the press recently that regardless of the topic of conversation, Trump always drags it back to the ballot reviews being pushed by his supporters. The Washington Post reports that there's almost unanimous agreement among Trump aides that the election can't be overturned under any circumstance. But one advisor said that attempting to tell that to Trump is pissing into the wind.
This guy's getting up in front of like wedding parties at Mar-a-Lago and doing bits about how the election was stolen.
Yeah.
He really has committed to this bit for life. This is a deathbed kind of bit that he will hold on to.
It's on his greatest hits. And you know what? That all brings us into Brendan's bad take of the week.
The bad take of the week comes from Jason Miller, who, if you don't remember, his smiling round head from the Trump administration has now transitioned to being the primary spokesman for Trump, who is one of our favorite residents down here in Mar-a-Lago. If you'll remember, back in March, Trump's team announced that he'd be making a new social media site. And he did just that. He created a one-person site called From the Desk of Donald J. Trump.
Some people might call it a blog.
Right, exactly. March 21st, Jason Miller said, "This is something that I think will be the hottest ticket in social media. It's going to completely redefine the game." And as you said, the riveting new site had all of the features of a blog and none of the features of any social media site whatsoever. But
wait, they want to talk back? No. This is about what I think.
He's like, listen, I don't want comments. I don't want likes. I don't want anyone to interact. I don't want anyone to say anything except for me. And all of his advisors were like, let's just build him a blog. It's a social media site.
Somebody get WordPress on.
So Jason Miller said, this blog is a great resource to find his latest statements and highlights from Donald Trump's first term in office. Well, much like everything Trump touches, the blog came to a quick, unceremonious, and humiliating end. Like Trump Wine, Trump Airlines, Trump Casinos, Trump University, everything else he's ever
I did see an Andy Borowitz headline that said, Trump will be reinstated president in August, and then in parentheses says, of Trump University.
Of Trump University. The site was generating fewer than 4,000 visits a day, and Trump reportedly ordered for it to not only be executed, but scrubbed entirely from his website, citing all the embarrassing news coverage about how little attention his blog was receiving. So after the site closed, just 29 days after opening, Miller said, it was just an auxiliary effort to the broader efforts we have and that we're working on. And then he went on Twitter to say that closing the blog was actually a precursor to Trump starting a real social media site. So my question for you is, which are we going to get first? Trump's new social media site or Trump's healthcare plan?
Or his tax returns, right?
Or his tax returns or infrastructure week.
Some interesting things there. First of all, in his defense, I would say 29 days may go past the over-under when somebody starts a blog.
Listen.
The average blog lasts 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, his blog lasted like 3.5 Scaramucci's.
Yeah, there you go. Here's another interesting point of it, though, probably more interesting. We were talking off air before we came on. I recently had the Punk Rock Politics Twitter account suspended from promoting tweets.
Right.
It was going to be promoting a tweet from my new book, Burn Black Wall Street Burn, now available on Amazon.com.
Now, let me ask you, was it because you put something really horrible in the tweet? Like, it was really racist, awful language, right?
No.
Was it because there was derogatory language, maybe foul, like adult language in it?
No.
Were you targeting someone? Were you attacking them?
No.
Were you including fake news of some kind?
No.
Was there nudity in the posts or sexual content?
No. Which you are allowed to put in a tweet, you just can't boost it.
Oh, that's right. You can't boost it. Well, you got me. They must have had a really good reason for suspending your account.
They had no problem with my post. And when I got to a manual review and actually had a multi-part conversation with a Twitter employee, an email thread.
Which, by the way, is amazing.
Yes.
You got a human.
I didn't think I was going to get a human. Yeah. Like, I thought that was totally outside the realm of possibilities. But it was a decidedly passive-aggressive young man who was very evasive on why exactly my account was suspended and why the post couldn't be boosted, and started giving all these, there's profanity. And I said, look, there's no text in it. It's a picture of the book cover.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With a link to Amazon that's going to run on the anniversary of the events the book's about. It was supposed to run Sunday and Monday. And, okay, well, and again, like, it's like, you have to know the answer. Why are you doing this? Well, it could be like profanity in other tweets. I was like, there's no profanity in my other tweets.
Just started the account,
right?
in fact.
And they're like, well, we even go into things like landing pages included in your bio. And it seems that that's what it was. I was like, wait, what? I was like, so the Punk Rock Politics website that's in the bio for the account that you never, ever see when you see a tweet, there was something on that makes a Twitter post ineligible. We're like, well, it could. We don't always do that, but it could. I was like, okay. And then I was like, well, there's no pornography. There's no
harassment. No,
right?
nothing.
And they're like, it was profanity. I said, there's literally no profanity on the fucking page. What's going on? Right?
I really wish you wrote that.
And he goes, actually, it was this article. And he puts up my gain of function article and just says it's because I named an appointed official. I was like, what? And he shows me an actual policy that says that it could be not eligible for promotion if you name officials. Now, clearly, this isn't a way to combat disparagement, you would think, or blatant, untrue statements, any kind of slander.
Yeah.
No. This is just an article reporting news by a professional journalist.
Yeah. Not even on your own personal site or something
No.
either. For a real publication.
Yes. And they're like, that's it. And
Yeah.
it's like, wait a minute, I had the wrong opinion on gain of function. I'm saying, hey, I think it may have escaped from a lab. There's a lot of evidence supporting that, and we really need to have a conversation on whether this is a good thing to be funding. That's my position.
Yeah. Same position that many millions of people are having
Now listen,
right now.
and this is what's important here, is that, look, I'm just one little indie journalist with a book by a little indie publisher. it's not a platform even worth, their time. We have a new Twitter account that has almost no followers. Please go and follow us on Twitter. And because I think everybody thinks you're a bot. If you start a Twitter account now, you have a brand new Twitter account with 2 followers.
People are like, why are you starting right now? Where have you been?
Nigeria, and you want my bank account information. Get out of here.
Not buying your book.
Right? But the point is these kind of umbrella policies allow this framing of the narrative of, hey, this is what you're allowed to say. And again, this goes back to Dr. Fauci having his emails with the Facebook team and explaining to him all these things that weren't necessarily 100% true. And that then guiding their well-intended efforts to keep fake news off their platforms, but then also setting the narrative of, here's the parameters, go outside of it, and we might penalize you a little bit. Now, again, not a big deal, okay? No big deal. Twitter ad, a couple books that would have sold, wouldn't have. But when you get the aggregate of the millions of people that use these platforms, and then you have the ability to say, hey, be careful what your opinion is, because it could hurt the way that you do things. Now, to my point, what you just said about Donald Trump's blog, as sad and funny as that may be, there's something really to the fact that here was a guy with, 72 million Twitter followers, I think he had?
Yeah, at least.
One of the most popularly retweeted, reacted to, overall
highest engagement of any account ever. Yeah.
In the history of Twitter. He goes off their platform, and it shows he has no means outside of it to recreate that. So that shows how clearly 2 things there. One, it does validate the people who say, look, the tech companies built that platform. Just like, the argument like my son and I have about the NFL sometimes, when he says the NFL does this to players, that to players, they don't let them do this stuff with their uniforms, and the no fun league. And I said, look, they built an extremely valuable enterprise that has created an opportunity for people. And you could say, hey, they earn their money, they're the draw. That's true, but you cannot. European football, you make about $40,000 a year.
Yeah, without the NFL, what are you as an exceptional world-class football playing athlete? If you're like, screw the NFL, where are you going to go? Nowhere. Right? Literally Nowhere. Other competition.
You'll be lucky if you could pay your living.
You're going to go to Canada or the CFL league, or arena, and you're going to make $40,000 a year.
So you look at it and you say, that's theirs. And they have the right to say, we built this. It took decades to turn this into a little mom and pop shop in the 60s to a multi-billion-dollar international enterprise, and we get to set the rules because we don't want you to devalue it in any way. I'm with them on that. Right? They pay very, very well, and they say, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. You're free to go somewhere else if you don't.
But that's so much different than a social media company who's you're not speaking on behalf of them.
I'm just framing the perspective. So my point the point is, it validates the social media company saying we built these platforms and we made them valuable. And that even the people, and look, there are a lot of people, take podcasting, Joe Rogan signed that $100 million Spotify deal. That market was created by YouTube, Twitter, Instagram,
Facebook,
all those different places where he organically grew all those followers on their platforms. And then it created $100 million enterprise that would not have been able to be created by a person outside of that.
Impossible.
So it makes 2 points here. One, yes, they built something that your persona isn't transferable outside of. But then 2, it does also show those things are pretty close to public utilities if being banished from it pretty much means you can't make money.
I know. Well, if that's your method of reaching people, there's no other way.
Is there any other method of reaching people today?
No, well, TV is it. I mean, unless you have a constant place on television, and you can be in the news or the news cycle, which Donald Trump also did, and he chooses not to do these days, or maybe no one will book him besides Newsmax. But unless you're on television or radio and you have your own even radio is like, what's that these days? how far are you getting?
Not far, man.
Without social media, you're right. I don't
Even
know.
those legacy institutions are leaning so hard on social media. Look at TV. Most of them are getting a big chunk of their revenue from YouTube.
And there are so many industries now that exclusively you're building your reputation and followers, if that's the case, or patrons, if that's the case, exclusively through social media. And that if you decide, I don't want to do that, I don't want to participate in that side of my industry, you cannot succeed. There's no path to success because other people are reaching all these consumers through social media exclusively, that you have no recourse. I mean, you could take out an ad in the Sunday paper, I guess, that is, we've got fewer and fewer pages of those happening. You could put an ad on TV, but otherwise there's no direct connection. You set up an email list, I guess, like a really slow blog, sending it to people's, you could
buy email lists and stuff. I mean,
or just sign up a text list or something.
There's
I mean, it's
not
really
much of a means to market anything today.
So Josh Hawley's onto something. The tyranny of big tech is real, and they control the narratives, and they control who's going. I mean, the same exact.
But I don't know how you fix it, because then the question becomes, I don't want the government deciding it.
No, and I also don't think that a place like Spotify is the gatekeeper for musicians for the rest of time too,
right.
where they're saying like, oh, congrats on your 1 million plays, here's $17, or Apple Music being only ever slightly better, or the Apple App Store like having complete and total say over what apps can go to their phones. There's another one where it's like, should they have the ability to function what people individually want to put on their own phones? Right. And right now they do. They have total say. If they don't like an app, they'll take it out of the store.
Yep.
And you can't get it unless, I don't know, there's some technological whiz out there who could tell me how that happens. But I'm pretty sure that they are the ultimate gatekeeper as this giant, and that's why they're under fire for the antitrust as well, because they have this like meaningless set of rules for. Well, we don't even know if there's a set of rules. It's a we'll let you in if we feel like it, and we'll kick you out if we feel like it. We'll stop your entire enterprise. And Amazon's doing the exact same thing. They'll remove a company or squash a company for seemingly no reason whatsoever.
And the result is, even in music and stuff, what you see is the people who sell the music to Taylor Swift of the world and stuff. They have these mega social media platforms of following. Right. So they're still playing that same game. The ones who've been successful as the legacy platforms have died out are the ones who best adapted going forward. And it's really never about quality. You and I were talking before the show went on about different things we have to promote and how much we hate it. How much time to do it effectively, to effectively keep up the level of engagement and retweets and shares and comments and all the things you have to do to keep, working your way up in the algorithm. You're not then doing the thing that you're creating that you're trying to market and exploit. So as a result, you end up with this very bland culture of art, in my opinion, at more so than ever in popular culture. I think when you look at from movies to music to just really every art form, books, you have this really homogenous kind of big tier, platform friendly stuff that seems to do well by people who've mastered that part. And then you have everything else. And it's like, try to find it. It's like trying to find a needle in a stack of needles.
Right. And these days, the people who've quote unquote mastered that, some of them are quite good at talking about their own stuff and engaging with fans about their own stuff. And there are very few artists out there who can genuinely be like, I'm working on a new album. Right. Here's some lyrics and here's me in the studio. And that's enough content. The vast majority of people who are successful at it actually are just good at participating in the culture wars about things that are somewhat related to their industry. And then you said this, it was so funny. I wish it had been on the podcast. You were like, it seems like having a Twitter account is like required for journalists these days. But the only thing that ever comes from a Twitter account is like people getting fired for saying shit.
That's why I never had one. People are like, how are you in journalism? You don't have Twitter. I'm like, I just see people get fired a lot, or at least giving like really serious apologies. And I do some stupid shit when I'm not on the clock. So I want to be.
Yeah. And listen, how do you get engagement these days? How do you rise above the noise? You got to have a hot take. You got to be funny. You got to be on trend. And guess what? Doing that, guessing wrong at the wrong time, being super for, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but talking, John Cena, for example, being like, oh, I'm so sorry to the people of China. And then like the rest of the world completely roasting him.
Right.
Because he got caught in the culture. All he was trying to do was promote a movie. That was it. He's not trying to be a politician.
That's interesting because you have, for folks hadn't seen that, John Cena, former WWE wrestler, who's like now an action film. I think it had something to do with those Fast and Furious movies,
It's the newest Fast and Furious movie.
So that franchise, which is, I didn't know this so recently, that has something like 5 of the top 20 grossing films of all time, adjusted for inflation.
Well, and because they're becoming these global hits.
So in the history of cinematic film, I believe it's 5 of the top like 13 grossing ever in the history, adjusted for inflation. So it's not just new movies, are Fast and the Furious. I didn't know there were. I saw the first one when I was like, I think a teenager when it came out or some shit.
It was a long time
ago. In
my
20s or something. The guy's dead that was in it, right?
Yeah, Paul.
Paul something. And I didn't know there's like 18 of them or something now.
They go on and on, yeah.
And I didn't know like the Rock's in them and all kinds of stuff, right? This is how unplugged I am, folks. But apparently they are fucking huge in Asia. Like the biggest thing there is. And I guess a big part of it is because action films will translate much easier than, let's say, comedy or drama.
Well, then they started setting them there too. They had Tokyo Drift, and turns out fast cars are appealing pretty much all over the world. And every place all over the world has their kind of fast car that they like. So Fast and the Furious was like, let's just do it. The world's fast cars everywhere, And so this became a huge hit in China. This is a huge franchise, so much so that John Cena actually learned how to speak Chinese.
Yeah, Mandarin.
A Mandarin. And he is trying to sell a movie. That's it. That's all he's trying to do.
Which is so incredibly important, because another thing that I had read that I was not aware of is the foreign receipts, foreign box office was the thing that replaced DVD sales in terms of the way they marketed. They said, we lost this huge revenue thing that when it was VHS and then DVD, where we had first run in the movie, then we had rentals, then we had to sell it at Walmart, right? And you had these 3 chunks of it. And then when it was like, oh yeah, nobody buys shit anymore, then it's like, oh, what are we gonna do for that third fucking leg, especially when the theaters aren't getting as many people? And then it was like, what if we, there's a lot of people in China. There's a lot of people, right? So Chinese box office in particular became a big part of the Hollywood gate. And also, I didn't know this until recently, a massive source of financing for films. Films are not financed through traditional means. They're not financed through banks. They're generally done. A producer will bring in investors who have played in this arena for a long time, so they know the phones to make ring when it's like, hey, this is a movie you're doing, this is a star we got. And that's also why you see a lot of this homogenous content, is because these aren't film buffs. These aren't like activist investors.
No.
These are like people that own oil, wells in Texas. And it's like, hey, you're rich. Remember all that money we made you on that movie? Here's the next one we got. And they want to hear something like, who's in it?
Yep.
What's it about? And show me the poster.
Yeah, and a big part of that, honestly, is who's in it. Like, there are actors who are box office, and I'm not even talking box office smashes, that are just like, that person is worth a $10 million box office, which is not a huge one, but it's if you're going to spend $3 million on the movie, you can make a lot for your investors. If you're like this, like, pretty famous person who's solid and likable, like, we know, and there's a scale. There's this person's worth $1 million box office, and then you have your people like The Rock, and they make $100 million on a movie.
Well, I read another interesting article recently that I found fascinating, and it was that there's now 2 kind of movies that Hollywood makes: the $100 million one and the $5 million one. They said what you cannot get made anymore is a $30 to $50 million movie.
Yeah.
They said they're almost non-existent because, this is the math on it, is that if you make a movie that you really want to do, then it's like, all right, we need Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
We need, a big female lead.
We need to explode about 14 cars.
Yeah. And we need these things. And then we could put 100 million. And at a certain point, it doesn't make sense not to do 100 million. So when you have a $20 million guy that's got a $20 million quote, as your lead, a female that's got maybe a 15 as your co-lead, and then
expensive
you bring on a big director.
Yeah.
You're at that point. It's like it doesn't make sense at this point, because now the amount of promotion that's going to have to go into it in order to make it appealing around the world, it doesn't make sense. Let's go bigger and bigger and bigger and put more and more into it, and then make it. And it has to be a franchise. We got to get 3 movies out of it, or it's not worth it. Maybe 5, right?
Yeah.
And that was the big appeal to all the. Look what everybody wanted to know. Why did Disney want Star Wars? They wanted a content machine. They wanted something to rival Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
What property are we going to have that we can
just crank out movie after movie after series,
and series and all these little minor ones, right? So then the other one is $5 million, and you make the low budget Steven Seagal direct to video type thing, and you make it all on foreign. And it used to be Redbox at the time on articles a couple of years ago. And they were like, yeah, you can make a 5. You have people that specialize in that. And you know who loves, like, for example, Steven Seagal is a fucking god in Russia.
Oh.
God there, right?
Yeah.
They love the cheesy American action, like the fighting, more theme stuff. And the Steven Seagal films, the Von Damme films that are still being made that you never fucking hear about, the really bad Stallone ones and stuff. Frank Stallone can make movies over there. Russia loves those. Ukraine loves those. So for $5 million, you don't even have to go into an American box office, and you can just put it in Redbox, Netflix, some of the lower end ones that are out there, Tubi and stuff, and then the Russian sales. The Ukraine sales, and that's it. So a $5 million movie, a $100 million movie, nothing in between.
So we're way down the rabbit hole here. But to return to the John Cena incident, he's trying to promote this film, and he says something like, it's great. Taiwan is going to be the first country that's going to get to see it. And of course, that totally incenses everyone in China. They all say, how dare you? Because in China, they like to believe that Taiwan is a part of their country and is not an independent sovereign nation. And that really is a very, very sensitive political subject over there. And they demand an apology because they're going to boycott the Fast and Furious movie. Immediately, all the Fast and Furious producers are like, John, you have to record an apology. You have to get on your knees and in Mandarin, by the way, tell them how deeply sorry you are.
You have to go learn Mandarin now. You probably didn't know yet. It's like, we're going to immerse you for 24 hours. It's going to be really hard. We're going to use some AI, and you're going to get a shot on your temple. It's going to hurt a little bit. You'll know Mandarin by evening.
And so this poor guy, who's just trying to sell a movie.
Looks like a hostage video.
It's so bad. He's like, it comes across so, the guy's an actor, let's be honest. So broken.
Come on. Wait, hold on. Wait a minute.
He is.
Did I just hear Brendan Reagan say that John Cena is an actor?
Professional wrestlers are some of the best actors.
All right.
Come on, man.
Wow. All right.
Different kind of acting. I didn't say he was like.
I'd say performer.
Okay, he's a performer. He's an entertainer. I think that's among everything. We all like to see him entertain us with his body slams.
He's not a thespian.
No, but acting has a broader term these days, I think. Anyway, professional wrestlers. Side note, I'm watching all these A&E biographies on all the old professional wrestlers. They were such incredible performers, man. They were over the top. It's all theater. I'm looking at it. I'm like, it's lights, it's costumes, it's script, And when guys aren't working well, they got to change the plot, and there's got to be conflict. I'm like, this is all just theater with steroids and cocaine. So I'm fascinated by all of that, and I'm riveted
Lots of Vicodin
and so many painkillers. So anyway,
I grew up, by the way, 40 minutes from the old WWF's training school. And then they would film all the Saturday morning wrestling at the Hamburg Fieldhouse, which was like a half hour from my house.
Oh, man.
So I saw so many of those when I was a little kid and met so many of the wrestlers and stuff like that.
I would have loved that as a kid. But anyway, back to our main character, John Cena here, who is not wrestling anymore. He's a TV star. And what comes along with that is when a producer says, get on Twitter, send a video of you apologizing. And he says, I love people in China. I'm so sorry. I made a huge mistake. Doesn't say what the mistake is, of course, because you can't wade too far into those waters, because literally the rest of the world comes cracking down on him and says, you're kowtowing to communists. You're kissing the boot of, communist China.
Well, John Cena should turn around and say, who isn't?
Yeah.
Who in the United States isn't right up to our government? Wall Street financing weapons that are going there. Come on, man.
Every company gets their stuff made there overseas.
Yes.
Like we all like it when we're making money, and now you're coming back cracking down on, like, he couldn't win. It was a no-win situation. But what was particularly bad about it was that the people in China like didn't even respond well to it. They're like, doesn't sound right. You didn't say, I need you to come out and say Taiwan is a part of China, or I'm not watching your movie. And it's like, I literally just wanted to race cars and crash cars in a movie. And now I'm in a global socio-political debate.
Here's the thing. China's rising. They're our biggest economic competitor. Many people believe the future is in Beijing. Is it unpatriotic? Is it un-American not to be able to say, you know what, fuck you and your money?
Is it patriotic to say that? Or is it not patriotic, did you say?
Would it be the patriotic thing to do to say, fuck you and your money? We're America. We don't let China tell us how to make movies.
Yeah, it would be. I think it would be. The NBA.
I think we look so weak.
Yeah, the NBA got caught up in the exact same type of thing, where it all started when one NBA team's general manager liked a tweet that was about God knows what, and it blew up into this firestorm where everyone was trying to manage the story, right? How do we feel about China? We can't fully endorse them because Americans would be like, what the fuck? But also we don't want to alienate them because we like their money. I mean, at some point you do have to say, there's enough money in America.
Right.
We don't need to bend over backwards.
Where do we get off that train? You know what I mean? Like, at what point do we, like, if you don't say it now, it's like the mob. You know, if they come in and say, hey, nice place you got here, shame something would happen to it, and give me $50 and I'll keep an eye out for it. You're on the hook now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're a mark. You're a soft mark, and they're coming back, and you've already shown them. You're like, you let the bully take your lunch money.
Yeah.
He doesn't leave you alone then.
Exact same thing happened in manufacturing in the United States. You cannot get a price margin on a mass-produced product that will make you competitive unless you send it to China so that your margins can be, your price of creating whatever you're creating is low enough that your margins help you compete in America. Nothing works without that cheap labor there. We've built all of our wealth on capitalizing on that cheap labor. So what do? We're in too deep. You can't just suddenly be like, we'll make things in America for 5-10 times as much. That's not going to work in any industry. There's always going to be someone who's going to be like, I don't care. I'm selling out. Like, I'll go to China. Like, I want to make this for cheap. I want their money.
Well, the historical narrative would be you develop other sources of cheap labor that are less threatening to you.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Build better relationships there. We do have several U.S. territories such as Guam and different places where your made in USA labels don't necessarily mean made in USA. So we have other places to go, but we're hooked on that cheap money. And I'll tell you what, it's going to come to a head at some point. And if it doesn't come early, it tends to come violent when it comes historically speaking.
Okay.
All right, on to our main topic today. U.S. military leaders, some of them pushing back against a effort to, and this has been going on, I'm going to quote an article, it's almost 10 years old now, an effort to take military sexual assault allegations out of the military chain of command and put them to outside advocates. Now, to tell you how old is this, I am a former military officer, very proud of my service, but I am the first one to tell you there are many problems with the U.S. Armed Forces, this being one of the most shameful one. This is from a 2011 column I wrote. A young woman who joins the military in the United States of America instantly doubles her chances of being sexually assaulted. She has a greater chance of being raped by a fellow soldier than of being killed in combat. Imagine that. If your daughter were to enlist in the service today, the greatest fear you should reasonably have is not that she will be deployed into a combat zone, but that one of the men serving with her will forever scar her with the emotional and physical trauma of sexual assault. The VA reports that while combat is the number one cause of PTSD in male soldiers, military sexual trauma is the highest for females and a major factor in substance abuse and homelessness, with 40% of female military veterans who are homeless reporting having been sexually assaulted while in service. Aside from the obvious social costs, MST cases carry a staggering financial price tag, nearly $900 million annually in medical costs for the VA, and another $20 million for the DOD and court-martial costs. This is how much of a problem women getting raped by their fellow soldiers are in America. And we're still having pushback saying, yeah, having accountability the way you do in the private sector, bad for business.
Not for us.
Yeah.
And it's really not simply, the problem isn't simply accountability, but it's prevention and treatment as well. Because as far as I know, I'm not a military person, but as far as I know, all of those things exist inside the military right now when it comes to even really major crimes that happen in the military, like assault and murder. Am I right about that? Like it's
okay. So you have the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice. So when you're serving in the military, you actually have a different set of laws than you as a civilian. They're more strict. There are things like, for example, adultery is illegal by the UCMJ. You get in trouble because it's extremely bad for morale when one soldier's screwing another soldier's spouse. Being in debt and missing payments is illegal, which is one of the reasons why soldiers, especially new ones, are exploited so much, because they know they can get your check docked. They'll finance up to 100% of your monthly pay. In many instances, it works better, I would argue, than the outside courts work. This is just one where it does not, where it never has. And this is also one, I've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit on this in reporting over the years. There's so many things. One of the things I find most fascinating is the things we don't talk about out loud in society that are staring us right in the face all the time. And one of them is that this has been happening forever, that rape and war, in fact, there's a term, war rape, which is pretty common and goes all the way back to pre-biblical times. So you have instances in which ancient armies used to pay their mercenaries in rape, pillage, and plunder. That's where that term comes from. And it's, you just take what you want. We're not going to give you money, but you're going to go in and fight that war, and then you do whatever you want with the place. We just want them incapacitated. We'll occupy it afterwards. But if you want to steal anything that's not bolted down, if you want to unbolt the stuff that is, and women go without saying, that happened for a long time. You go all the way back to the Roman legions. They had prostitution platoons that followed in the rear with the logistics, and they were rewarded with and by prostitution, I mean sex slaves that were conscripted, not people who chose it as a career. This is not new. And to the point where one of the most underreported things of World War II and the Greatest Generation is they were really, really rapey, to the tune of thousands of rape allegations, just the reported ones from American soldiers alone, over 5,000 from Allied soldiers. Hundreds of official ones just in a tiny little village of Normandy, that place that we revere and make the movies about and talk about. We never talk about what happened in the occupation afterwards, which was a lot of rape. We do often talk about the Russian rape and how many of Stalin's soldiers in Germany and elsewhere participated, but we always kind of leave out that the U.S. did that. In occupied Japan, they actually set up conscripted brothels because the American soldiers were spreading too much venereal disease that they thought, hey, if we get a bunch of girls and make them work in these brothels and they just do it there, can we contain it and treat it and not have this, medical crisis that a rebuilding country can't keep up with? And they did it for a while under MacArthur. So these are the less glamorous parts of warfare that you don't hear about. And, I was so curious at the point because as a male, and I trust you have the same thoughts of, it would seem to me, and I'll preface it with, while I served as a military officer, I was never in combat, never served during a time of combat. I was in the peace period of the 90s. But it occurred to me, it seems to me that the last thing you would think of is rape or sex while bullets are flying and
right.
As I delve more deeply into it, there is a very, very understandable biological imperative, which is the last thoughts males tend to have before they believe they're going to die, before they've spread their genes, is to spread their genes.
Right.
And it is a weird psychological reality that you can argue. I'm certainly not justifying. I'm certainly not saying it should be given license. I'm just saying that it's there. It's always been there. There's a tremendous amount of evidence that it is part and parcel with the concept of warfare. And at a minimum, I think it's just one of the many reasons why we should look at war as something that, in the words of Ernest Hemingway, no matter how justified, is always a crime. And these are just one of the many things that you see that's not spoken of and not made in considerations when we willy-nilly deploy troops into places. But then the other part, the majority of this does not happen in war. It just happens in the regimented lifestyle. And there is a difficulty you have in putting men and males with females in a locked down environment, lockdown, high stress, isolated environment. And one of them is, like prisons, sex is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, if willful consensual sex doesn't happen, the other kind does. Mm. And this requires the kind of deep dive, broad conversation, not just say, hey, here's a new policy. Yes, we absolutely need to fix what's broken now, because right now, when it's being handled in the chain of command, it's almost never going to trial. They're almost never getting convictions when it does. And very often, the accuser then has to serve out the rest of their time with the rapist.
Yeah. And okay, so what I find fascinating about the response to this problem is that Senator Gillibrand in New York is leading this legislation right now that has a seemingly filibuster proof majority. She's got a bipartisan support. There's plenty of people on both sides who say, we probably need independent justice for this. We probably need to take it out of the military chain of command and give it to this independent panel to review. We're all kind of on the same page about that. Who are the only people who are against that right now? It's, as we've just learned, General Austin received these memos from the heads of all of the branches of government saying, we're not so sure about that. We're not ready to give that up. So if you had to put on the hat of the head of the Air Force or the head of the Navy or something and justify for me why the military should continue to have those things, what even would your argument be at this point?
It's always going to be the same. It's going to be the same thing as don't ask, don't tell, morale. And it's going to be that if the feeling that if we take it out of house, it'll be done in some kind of ultra woke, stages of consent for making out type way. Yeah. And the morale, now obviously it wouldn't be done that way. That would be the gut reaction from the masses.
Because they're not saying do away with the UCMJ. They're saying just these things.
This thing, take it outside.
We would like, and even so much as sexual harassment, which says to me, if you don't want sexual harassment being viewed by any kind of independent panel, there's probably a whole lot more sexual harassment going on than we know about and that you don't want out in the outside world.
Let me tell you, one of the things that I learned in the military later as an officer was that the amount of female enlisted soldiers that told me they had sex with their drill sergeants was staggering.
Wow.
Now, this was consensual, even though it's illegal in the UCMJ.
Yeah.
But so it wasn't rape. But the other part that you get into in the military is that then you have the power dynamic hierarchy is ramped up to exponential levels, because you're literally talking about the person who's keeping you safe in dangerous situations. And when you think of basic training was a pretty psychologically rough thing. I think I was one of the people who was like easier on. I think I was very well prepared to go in there, having been an athlete, being a big guy and all that stuff. It was not nearly as challenging for me as it seemed to be for the people around me. And it was still one of the most mentally exhausting things I've ever done in my life.
Really?
Right? So, yeah, because the whole idea is to break you down and build you back up. So it is to make you helpless and then to make you feel empowered. Mm-hmm. But in part of that making you helpless, they are gods. Mm-hmm. Those drill sergeants they're like a pet's master. Yeah. They control when you eat, when you take a leak, when you sleep, if you sleep, where you sleep, when you get woken up, and they surely can show favoritism.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're supposed to, in terms of some people need a little bit more than others, and more of a hard time, that is. And when you make that out, that dynamic then becomes the females tend to gravitate toward that, presence, and you end up having bad things happen. And I don't know, Brendan, I don't even know at this point, having served in the military, whether it's a good idea to have men and women serving together.
Wow.
I don't. I really don't. So what you're asking me is that point, I don't know that there's a way to do it right. And to create an effective military force and then still have all of the things in place. And I think this would be the argument that a lot of the seniors are making. Not that like, hey, I want to be able to rape people, I want my soldiers to. I think what some of the people at the very top say is, okay, I know you'd like this to be every bit as safe and respectful and consensual as the average workplace in the United States. Right. And I can't promise you that and promise you I could deliver the most effective combat force to defend our country. And having been a soldier, I don't disagree with that. As awful as that sounds, I'm telling you honestly, I don't disagree with that, to the point where I don't know whether or not you can effectively have those two things coexist. They might be to some degree mutually exclusive in human nature. I know that sounds awful, but I'm just giving you that from my experience.
Yeah, because we're not existing in an era that's going to segregate by gender in the military or forbid certain people from serving. We're not. That's not going to happen. It would be catastrophic in this country, and for good reason. Generally speaking, for good reason. I don't mean like because. Anyway, I'll move on. And yet, policing itself doesn't seem to be working. It doesn't seem to be preventing it at all. And as you said in a 10-year-old article, so I can only imagine that it's continued and possibly gotten worse, is that the treatment afterwards is so poor that it's leading to a mental health crisis for people who've been assaulted in the military. And I bet you that doesn't just include women, but primarily is what we're talking about here. So that says to me, complaints aren't making their way out because they're probably looking at them as fruitless. Complaints are...
Yes, that's the other part is when you look at the staggering numbers of how many of the accusations never get even tried, let alone convicted, then you have to ask yourself, how many people just say, what's the point of that? Because now I'm going to shake everything up, kick the hornet's nest, and then be stuck here for the next, 9 months until this tour is over with these same people. I'll just have my nightmares at night.
And I think one of the arguments that the heads of the different branches of government said was, oh, well, this is going to slow down our process to get justice and blah, blah, blah. It's like, so you're saying it's that big of a problem that we have that many cases that we need to, well, great. Let's do 5 panels then instead of 1.
Generally 8 out of 10, we just kind of like
kick under the rug. Yeah, exactly. Right. So if you're saying we have such a huge problem that adjudicating it fairly is going to take too long, well, that says to me that what you're doing is completely ignoring a mess. You've got a situation that's so bad that we don't even know how bad it is. And all of the people who are leaving with baggage and trauma, we have no idea what the levels of those are that come from this that is underreported. I mean, we don't know in society either. And it's not like our judicial system is particularly good at prosecuting sexual assault anyway, because it's almost always a he said, she said type of situation that has very little evidence. And there's social stigma and for a million other reasons, of course. But it seems like if it's that bad in society and it's exponentially worse in the military, we have to make some kind of change. There has to be we have to start with policy. I agree, like there might be a giant philosophical change that needs to come as a result of this. Let's just stop having wars. That would be great. Right. But at first, I think it's time to shift the attention away from the chain of command solving things, worrying about whether or not taking away justice from them allows them to do their job right or wrong, and saying, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I
when
think
we
this
don't.
step is a no-brainer. I've been advocating for this for over 10 years, and I think it's a no-brainer. I think the first thing you do is you have outside eyes on it, and then I think you have to have severe punishment, and you have to have a cultural top-down change where from the moment you go into basic, from the moment you get sworn in, from the moment you're talking to your recruiter, this is talked about. This is talked about as something that will be fiercely prosecuted to the fullest extent of the UCMJ, and just cannot happen.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting the opposite. We're getting the, hey, let's not talk about this at all, and let's hope we never have to, but oh, by the way, we almost always have to.
Nothing to see here.
Right.
Is the issue that we're getting right now. So
Yeah, because when you don't have the means to do something right, then you end up saying, let's not do it at all.
yeah. So more money into the military.
Yeah, right.
That's what we need to do at this point.
All right, so I think that is going to wrap it up for our spring season, we'll call it, for our
Yeah.
summer hiatus. I will be out, and listen, let me preface this by saying, going back to the social media thing, I hate whoring myself out or my work. So anytime you see a post or an event or buy my book or it's still available or here it is, I hate it. I'm an artist. I like to write and then be done. And I'd really like to go back and start writing my next book. And I don't like having to whore it out all day long. But I will be at Fogartyville Community Center at WSRQ's facility in Kumquat Court in Sarasota on June 15th at 7 p.m. for a book signing and talk on my new book, Burn Black Wall Street Burn, which is historical fiction regarding the 1921 racial massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the anniversary of which was earlier this week. So come out and see me. If not, you can get the book on Amazon. For Brendan Reagan, I am Mitch Maley, and we will see you come fall. Hang in there, people.